Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome back to the DMZ, everybody.
So we're on a Thursday. It is less than 2 weeks before the Democratic convention begins. We are in the tail end of the House and Senate primaries, the tail end of the sweepstakes search, and on the cusp of a lot of decisions on school reopening. So are your kids going back to school yet?
Not yet. Allegedly September 7th. We're counting down the days, Bill.
So that's a delay in West Virginia, but it's still expected to reopen in person, hybrid.
As of now, but
Which way is
who
it?
knows?
Is it full in person or hybrid right now?
I think it's full in person. I know, my kids go to a private school and they've had a plan for many months, and it includes breaking their class is going to be essentially treated as a family, which means they will not interact with other kids, which means if one of them got COVID, God forbid, the class would be quarantined and the rest of the school have not been susceptible. They're going to have these like plexiglass things around each desk. And our school was supposed to open, I think, August 17th, which would be right around the corner. And the governor pushed it back. Now, I don't think he has the right to do that personally, to tell private schools that they can't open. And I know Maryland has had some issues with this, I think in Montgomery County. So we'll see what happens. But if he does this again, then,
You'll vote Democrat for governor?
We'll see. I need to register. I have to. I'm efforting that process right now.
So you are planning to vote in West Virginia this cycle?
Yes.
Even though, as you have written, you will not vote for either Trump or Biden.
Correct. Well, I don't even know if I'm good. I don't even know if I'm going to vote. But what I do know is that it will not be in Virginia. The general election. I'm officially moving my, residence. My wife has already got the license and she's ahead of me as you can imagine on logistical things like that. So
now you have taken a shift in your emphasis in the past few days, where you have had some critical posts about Democrats, and what you told me is this is affecting your Twitter following again. I see you're back?
I'm back for now.
So, as I was saying, I've noticed a slight change in the focus of your recent columns. You've been pretty harsh on Trump for a long time, but you're starting to express some concern about the Democrats. You had a piece about you can't vote for Biden because of abortion. You have a piece about you're worried about Democrats getting rid of the filibuster. How are your loyal social media fans reacting to this shift in tone?
Well, my loyal fans are reacting great, but not all of them are loyal. So I've lost another 600 this week.
600 what?
Which if you take what I lost because of just the Justin Amash columns, and now what I've lost on Twitter, this is all on Twitter, because of the last week's columns, I got to think I'm down a couple thousand because of it. So not good. I mean, but, the thing is, it's an interesting thing right now. Like, if you write something that is critical of Democrats, it is perceived that you are, number one, there's this notion that, like, if you don't vote for Biden, you're voting for Trump, which is bullshit.
Or you're helping Trump.
No, it's not even that. It's a vote a non-vote is a vote for Trump, is what they say. Okay, so it's literally, if you don't vote for Biden, you are voting for Trump. But also it's a thing where, look, as a journalist, as an opinion columnist, and I take shots at everybody, if you are criticizing Democrats, it is perceived that you are trying to help Donald Trump get elected. Like, there is no, well, he's a columnist, he takes shots at everybody. It is perceived that it is like, I am acting in bad faith as an activist trying to destroy Joe Biden to keep him from getting elected. Rather than what I'm really trying to do is which is a couple things. One is stake out the challenges. I think it's very likely that Joe Biden is going to win the presidency. I think it's likely that Democrats are going to control the Senate and the House. And I think it's likely that Democrats are going to make efforts to consolidate power and push for a lot of things that I disagree with. So I'm staking that out now. The other thing I'm doing is, frankly, just responding to news. I mean, President Obama, Barack Obama, at the John Lewis funeral, urged Democrats to get rid of the filibuster and to use that opportunity to make D.C. and Puerto Rico states, which I think would probably mean four Democratic senators. We've constantly been hearing of talk about stacking the Supreme Court. I think that's legitimate to talk about and to write about. But there's a perception that if you dare mention anything negative about the Democrats, you're really trying to reelect Donald Trump, which is absurd if you've been following me for, I don't know, the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have to abandon your conservatism. It's one thing to say, hey, if you want to get rid of Trump, you should be laser focused on getting rid of Trump, especially now in this window between August and November. So if you're taking this point in time to raise these questions, you're not being strategic. So I sort of get that, but it's not reasonable to expect a conservative critic of Donald Trump to stop being a conservative and adopt every.
But actually, I would actually say that has happened a lot. That's actually one of the things that has surprised me. It seems to be that a lot of never Trumpers who are never Trump conservatives have changed. Not only, so they're not just supporting Biden in the short term as an effort to get rid of Trump, which I would understand the logic of that. But it seems to me that some of them have actually changed their entire political worldview on, so I haven't. And I think that's what pisses some people off.
Now, I think I would make certain criticisms or at least challenges to what you are saying in these columns. And mind you, I've not been able to read them start to finish because of your infernal paywalls. But if I'm missing a point, obviously, fill in the gaps for me.
Well, and let me just jump in there real quick. This is a real problem. Journalism is trying to figure out how to survive, and there are different models. There's the model where we have a rich funder who basically supports everything, and there's a model where you have a foundation where donors can give you money, and then there's a model where you try to get cheap clicks and page views and slideshows, right? And then there's the model where you have the paywall. None of these things are perfect, but if you want good journalism, you probably need to support it. But I can just tell you, as a writer, it's kind of, number one, it tends to be hard to get buzz about something you said. So, for example, I think this is true, that I started the debate over whether we should burn it all down with the Republican Party. I think that I started that debate, and then I think David French came in, and then like Charlie Sykes, and like now it's been everybody has weighed in on this, Mike Murphy and a whole bunch of people. Peggy Noonan even sort of dipped her toes in it. I think I started that debate, but I didn't get really the credit for it because it was halfway through a column that was headlined something that I don't control, which is fine. The first half of the column was kind of about how bad Trump is. And then halfway through, I flipped and said, but having said that, and then I go into why I don't think we should burn it all down. But part of the other problem is if on the rare chance that you do have a column that catches fire, people can't read it. And so, and now we've lost connection. The other problem, though, is on the off chance that on the rare occasion when you actually have a column that does catch fire, even though people can't read it, the problem is they're responding to what they think the column says. And so they're reading like 200 words out of a 750 word column, right? It's almost as bad as just going off the headline.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of the nuance and things that I put in these columns, and by the way, they're liberated from the paywall like 3 days later. But I think a lot of the criticism I get is a result of people actually not even. It's not only that they didn't read the column, but it's like they couldn't have read it unless they, paid.
Are you allowed to do little Twitter threads that go beyond what's shown in the paywall that give people more of a taste?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I don't think there's any prohibition on anything. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I will kind of do a Twitter thread to talk about some of the things that are down in the column. But, look, when you spend a lot of time writing a column, getting it just right, I want people to read it. And I want to encourage people to sign up and support, the beast. And so I just, I feel like, if it serves my purpose to do the thread and to kind of spell out what I wrote, I've done that before. But by and large, I don't do that. I want them to actually read the way that it's been written in the format in which it's supposed to be consumed. But I can say, like, Jamel Bouie tweeted something about. Oh yeah. He was basically saying, my opposition to the filibuster my opposition to Democrats killing the filibuster. He was sort of making light of that. Like, if I'm opposed to more democracy, how can I compare that to Trumpism? And what he missed is the part about where I talk about how, like, not only do I think it's bad to kill the filibuster, but it's bad to kill it in order to get 4 more Democratic senators, and then it's bad to stack the Supreme Court. But I don't know if he left that out because he didn't want to deal with those possibilities, which, I mean, again, this is not insane. President Obama just talked about the statehood issue and urged Democrats to kill the filibuster. He called it a Jim Crow era relic, even though last time I checked, he employed it against Judge Alito. So basically, it's unclear to me whether he just left that out of his tweet because he didn't want to grapple with those aspects of my column, or whether he just didn't know because he didn't read far enough down to get it.
Well, no, I didn't read Bowie's entire response, so forgive me if I'm not capturing him accurately. And let me just say also, I largely agree with you on this point, and I might write about it myself very soon. But it is definitely widely accepted amongst the progressive pundit class and a lot of progressive activists and some folks who are not even capital P progressives, like, Jonathan Chait, for example, who are more moderate but still very partisan, that the filibuster is anti-democratic and it has and is being overly abused by Republicans. Now, I agree of the abuse part, that it was abused by Republicans under Obama. And there is an argument that, the filibuster wasn't written into the Constitution or the initial Senate rules, so it's not like it's somehow sacred. But it is part of the spirit of the Constitution that we do not have a tyranny of the majority, democratic, capital T democratic system. It's a republic, not a democracy in that respect. And the filibuster has largely been in that spirit. And Obama is historically wrong to call it a relic of Jim Crow, because it did begin before Jim Crow. And even in the Jim Crow period was used not only by racist Southern senators to stop civil rights laws, but by progressive senators pursuing economic goals. So what I think...
It's a philosophically neutral tool in the sense that just like states' rights had been summoned by... states' rights, the argument of states' rights is an argument, it's a separate argument, but my point is it has been championed by progressives for things that they want, and it's been championed by, I don't want to use the term conservatives, but, it's a tool that people can use for good or evil.
Right. Now, I don't think you're correct in saying Obama's a hypocrite because he used it for Alito, because it wasn't really used for Alito. He voted against cloture, but that was a protest vote. Now, Democrats in general filibustered a whole bunch of things during the George Bush administration, or even if you're not having a technical filibuster, there has been a de facto acceptance that you need 60 votes for most anything. And so parties don't even try to put stuff on the floor if they don't have 60 votes in hand. I mean, there's not a whole lot of bipartisan collaboration happening with Donald Trump right now, because Democrats are using the fact that they can stop things that don't have 60 votes to their advantage. So there is this impatience on the part of a lot of Democrats and progressives that Republicans have abused these things. Republicans have prevented Obama from pursuing legitimate goals like climate change, immigration. Well, actually, not immigration reform, because they got that passed in the Senate. It was the House that's the problem. The whole Merrick Garland thing. There's now enhanced.
And let me just say that was the other interesting pushback. Like, and by the way, I mean, I think you can see like a common thread here, right? I mean, my columns are part of if you read them, they're part of a tapestry. And so part of my argument against blowing up the GOP plays into my later column, which is basically warning that the Democrats are going to basically tap into their own version of Trumpism, which is to consolidate power. And look, I mean, my question is, I thought we were being sold a return to normalcy. And if we care about restoring norms and institutions, which ostensibly that's part of part of the reason I don't like Trump is I want to restore norms and institutions. And now Democrats are basically saying, well, guess what? As soon as we get power, we're going to change the rules for how things get done so that we can then consolidate power. And here's the part I want to make, but we have a really good reason for it. And so I was on Twitter, again, being dragged and trolled by people. And someone said, but Matt, you don't understand. You don't understand. Republicans have screwed Democrats so bad. Remember Merrick Garland? We have to do this. And what are you against, like, passing voting rights legislation? If we have to break the filibuster for a good cause, and Republicans have been doing this to us the whole time. And then I said, I hear where you're coming from, but when I tried to stop my side from embracing Trump, what I heard was, hey, we can't get a fair shake with the media and the Democrats. the ends justify the means. We have to go with Trump because otherwise we can't win. They'll never let us win. And I said, like, it was wrong then, and I would caution, progressives today from that. And so then somebody said, how dare you say that Democrats have been, haven't always played fair? Like, can you cite any examples? And I could have cited like Robert Bork or whatever, but I said, like, oh, let's just look at Mitt Romney, right? They said he was declaring a war on women. They called him a dog abuser. They said he doesn't even pay taxes. And then someone else responds and calls me that I'm playing both siderism. And I'm like, well, wait a second. I was just responding. You asked for examples.
Well, I think
whatever I say. Anyway.
Well, I mean, I largely agree with you on the filibuster point. And I want to talk about that in a bit more detail. But right there, I think you're getting off message there. Because
by allowing them to ask me questions and responding to Twitter, I'm getting off message.
Well, if Democrats were excessively mean to Mitt Romney, that is separate from the filibuster question. Robert Bork,
you got to follow the trail of how I got there. The way that I got there is I said we shouldn't have the filibuster, or we shouldn't kill the filibuster. Somebody on Twitter said, but you don't understand. If we don't stack the deck in our favor now, Republicans screwed us over so bad with like Merrick Garland and all that. And I said, I think it's horrible when that these things happen. But the argument you're making is the same argument that Republicans made to me when they supported Trump. And I think that was wrong. And they said, well, cite me, so I ended up going down a rabbit hole. But the point is, there was no appeasing these people.
Well, you're not going to appease folks because the narrative on the left here, and I'm saying left very, very broadly, it's not just activist types. There are moderates who are in the same point. It's really a partisan thing. That narrative is very, very deeply set at this point, so it's really hard to argue with folks about it. What is hard for those folks to grasp is if you say, well, I have to get rid of the filibuster for X. Climate change is a morally urgent matter, and if Republicans aren't going to play fair here, we have to break it to do that. Voting rights is fundamental to democracy. If Republicans aren't going to meet us collaboratively on that, we have to do this. If the problem is, one, in for a penny, in for a pound. If you do it for one issue, it's done, and anybody can then use the freedom to pass things on narrow party line votes to do all sorts of things, good or bad. The day will come where Republicans are back in charge, and not only can they pass bad things on their own, they could easily repeal your things and perhaps do it very, very quickly because pendulum swings can happen very rapidly these days. And this is to your point about what Obama said specifically. And Matt, to get me to a place where I'm criticizing Obama, that's hard for me to do. I don't do that very lightly. But Obama said specifically in the John Lewis eulogy, we need voting rights, we need expanded polling places, we need early voting, we need statehood for DC and Puerto Rico, we need to stop partisan gerrymandering, and if that requires getting rid of the filibuster, so be it. I don't know if you read the book How Democracies Die.
Yeah.
But that is literally...
I did, and I interviewed...
Right,
I interviewed the authors.
I mean, that is literally what they talk about. They literally talk about once you start using... Once they're weaponizing rules, even if it's in the guise of noble reasons, and I think Obama's sincere here. I don't think he's trying to be duplicitous. I don't think the average Democrat's trying to be duplicitous. I think they're trying to do it for principal reasons. But if you do something that messes with voting and the structure of government on a narrow party line vote, it is very, very easy to accuse the people of doing it for narrow partisan reasons. And that opens the door very widely for the other party to do the same thing in kind and worse. If you think Republicans are so mean that they would use the filibuster to obstruct things, guess what? If Democrats create 4 new senators, which presumably would be favorable to Democrats. You can say it wasn't about that. You can say it wasn't that I assume they're going to be Democrats. I just wanted to be enfranchised. What's the Republicans when they're in charge to say, well, I'm going to go carve up states. I want to go create some senators for myself. And I can do it with 50 votes because you guys did it with 50 votes. That is the downward spiral. That is how democracies die. Authors were saying would happen if you start treating folks reciprocally like that.
Well, and the goal would be like once you are in power, you would then have to change the rules so dramatically because you would know, if the other side gets in power, they're not going to cut us a break. They're not going to exercise forbearance. They are going to totally vanquish us. So we cannot let them get in power. So you would know that once you got power, you would have to change the rules so dramatically that you could never lose it again. Because if you ever lost it, the other side would seek revenge. They wouldn't exercise forbearance. They would try to run up the score and make it so that you could never, ever win again, right?
It's highly, highly dangerous. I mean, I think it's dangerous in general, but the specific reasons that Obama gave are the most dangerous reasons to get rid of the filibuster. I mean, if you're going to change the Senate rules by bending the Senate rules, remember, the rules are supposed to be changed to the 2/3 vote. It's using parliamentary trickery called the nuclear option to get rid of the filibuster on that score, which granted both Democrats and Republicans have done in regards to judges. And look, to do it for judges is less risky because you can't race to the bottom in the same way. If both sides get their judges when they have power, you get rough balance, which is what the whole end goal for the judiciary is anyway. So that's a kind of, mutually assured destruction that doesn't really end up a nuclear war. But if you start doing it for legislation, if you can pass legislation quickly, you can repeal legislation quickly. And that means that laws become inherently destabilized. You don't know if they're going to last from one administration or one Congress to the next. And if you start doing it in terms of voting rules and structure of Congress, now you're getting into the fundamental core of the system. And to do that by bending the Senate rules in the first place on a narrow party line vote, then passing the change on a narrow party line vote, and then claiming, oh, this wasn't for partisan reasons. We had principled reasons for doing this. Well, if they're so principled, why couldn't you get up bipartisan support for it? And that's what, look, it's hard. It's gonna be hard for President Joe Biden to get bipartisan support for some of these big ticket things. I'm not claiming it's going to be a cakewalk, but that is the challenge if these reforms are going to stick and we're going to return to normalcy and we're going to depolarize the country. That extra effort has to be made right now. If you immediately revert to the hyper-partisan route, people are going to say, hey, that's not what I voted for. That's not what I was expecting with Joe Biden. That was not the deal. And that's where you might get that very quick pendulum swing the other way.
Yeah. And I think that that part of the danger from Trump is that Trump is so bad that the Democrats are going to try to, and it's not just the Democrats, you see it with the Never Trumpers. They're replicating Trump to get rid of Trump. They're mocking Trump and acting like Trump to get rid of Trump. And I think the Democrats, in a form of revenge, not just against Trump, but against Republicans, because Trump has been so bad that they're swinging to this kind of authoritarian place too. But the danger is Trump is so bad that if you say anything bad about the Democrats, or if you just warn them, like, do not go there, the perception is you're trying to help Trump win re-election by doing that. And so I think some people felt like because I'm criticizing Democrats, I know some people felt like because I'm criticizing Democrats for this shark bump that that I'm secretly trying to throw the game as if I have that power, right? That I'm secretly trying to help Trump get elected. It's a bad cycle that he has. I don't even say he totally kicked it off, but he certainly took it to a new low.
Now, one thing I think,
I just think it's like, the cycles of violence, the cycles of abuse. It happens in politics too.
Now, I agree with you about the filibuster. I agree with you about trying to get back to normalcy and depolarizing the country. I think you could do more to square that position with your view about Biden and abortion, because I think this would be good for the pro-life movement in general to do some hard thinking about. If it is the case that you really can't expect to get 5 votes on the Supreme Court to flat overturn Roe. I mean, you just had John Roberts go wobbly on you by flipping on this Louisiana case. Now, some Democrats say he's playing a long game here. He still left the door open to do a bigger thing on abortion down the line. Maybe that's true. But you at least have to, if you're on the right, have to question, is this really going to work at the end of the day? Am I really going to get 5, do something that dramatic when they keep flinching time and time again? Well, if that's the case, you should be thinking about abortion in a different, more pragmatic way. I mean, even if you did overturn Roe v. Wade, you would not make abortion illegal in all 50 states. You would get it in some states, but you sure as hell know that a lot of states are going to keep it legal. I don't think you'd ever pass a federal law to outlaw it, across the country, even if that would be constitutional, because there'd be a massive backlash to that. There's a lot of people who support abortion rights in the country. The question is, can you, in a depolarized America, get abortion rights people and abortion opponents to come together around a regime where you're greatly limiting the number of abortions? Is there common ground there? And I would argue that there is. Not in the let's make it really hard to find an abortion clinic kind of way, which is what the Louisiana law was about. But in can we make contraception widely available? Can we make sex ed widely available so there's fewer unwanted pregnancies? That's the kind of space where a Joe Biden, who in his heart doesn't like abortion because he said it repeatedly over the course of his career. So that's why I even though you're right, man, you're in your column that, he flip-flopped on the Hyde Amendment under pressure from the left. That's true. But in his heart, he doesn't want, huge abortion numbers. So if you're never going to flatly ban it, Biden's the kind of guy you want in there to talk to and say, hey, what can we do to get both sides on board with an abortion reduction program?
Yeah, I have so much to say in so many different angles, and this is why I want people to read my columns. And that one you're talking about is actually available now. It's down behind the paywall because I work really hard to write 750 words to explain myself exactly the way that I want people to understand me. And even talking about it doesn't quite do justice. But I will endeavor to lay out a few points that I think will respond. So first of all, I could have cited a bunch of things that I disagree with Joe Biden on: taxes, fracking, all sorts of things. But I think that the real problem with Donald Trump is fundamentally a moral problem, right? And even though I agree with Trump on a lot of issues and even some of the policies he's passed and judicial nominees, I would still oppose Trump based on a moral issue, not based on a moral sort of on principle. So that's the reason that I've decided. People have accused me of being a one-issue voter, but I chose to focus my decision not to cast a vote for Biden or Trump on an issue that I thought was equally weighty. this issue, which to me, now we can get into the weeds on, does it even matter? Are we ever really going to get rid of abortion? But to me, I mean, I would compare it to that would be like saying to me, I'm an abolitionist in the 1850s, and you say, not you, but someone says well, we're never really going to get rid of slavery. Let's just try to see if we could mitigate it as much as possible. Well, some people believed in that, and that was a debatable point. But a lot of abolitionists said, no, this is an immoral, evil thing. And America, as a civilization, we need to be on the record saying that this is wrong. And that's kind of where I am to a certain degree on this issue. I am one more point and then I'll shut up. But I had people talking to me. You can tell I'm a little obsessed with Twitter right now, Bill. You probably, before I get into this story, let me just ask, I mean, I think you know this. Do you know what it's like to basically be ratioed on Twitter and have it at least feel like, if you didn't know better, feel like the whole world was against you, just on Twitter?
Well, I've been ratioed before, but it's always by, hardcore socialists. So I always feel like I know this is not the whole world coming down on me. I know this is just a small faction, but they're just very adamant at the present time.
You know that intellectually, but did you feel like they're shaming you? And they're I mean, for me as a conservative, it's usually they're trying to say I'm a bad person. I'll give you an example of it. So one of the arguments I got back was Matt, you say you're pro-life and you say that abortion matters, but you know what? Donald Trump is responsible for 150,000 deaths this year because of COVID. And to which I say, number one, Donald Trump's not responsible for 150,000 deaths in America because of COVID. And I think he's probably responsible for thousands by virtue of his mishandling of it, but he's not responsible for all of them. But even beyond that, Bill, there are around, I would estimate around 800,000 American, abortions have taken place this year. So even if you want to say, well, okay, some of those were, you would have an exception for rape, incest, life of the mother. Some of them, wouldn't have had a great quality of life. You go through, we're still talking that in the United States of America, let's say some of them were very early on, very early, or first trimester, very early on or something. We're still at a point where if you believe that life begins at conception, let's say, if you're pro-life, we've aborted a lot more babies this year than have died from COVID. And yet nobody cares. Nobody talks about it. We are currently in a pandemic and people are rightly freaked out about that, but we will have aborted twice as, 4 times as many babies, but no one seems to care. So I don't even know I think I did tweet that, but that's kind of where I'm at on this issue.
Well, I mean, every time I talk about healthcare, I always get a bunch of single payer folks saying X number of people are going to die without single payer insurance. You're a monster. And
that's what they would say. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a go-to. I mean, go to any city council meeting. You don't pass this measure, my child's going to die. You don't have this parking restriction or this speed bump. My child's going to die. I mean, everyone wants to go to that space whenever they can. But in the case of,
there's a difference between somebody who's alive might die if government doesn't provide housing versus you are going to go to a facility and a doctor is going to perform a surgical operation where if everything goes right, a baby is not born. That is an overt act versus this person died early because they didn't get as much treatment as they might have gotten.
Without sharing your view about whether that constitutes a death or not. In the single payer example, you can say, hey, if you're not for single payer, people are not going to have health insurance, people are going to die. And I can say, if you are pursuing a policy goal that's never going to come to fruition for the next 20 years, if that, people are going to die because other things could have been done short of single payer, but still providing health coverage, and you wouldn't be flexible enough to allow that to happen. So maybe that's on you, buddy. In the case of abortion, there are things that pro-life Congress people and the supposedly pro-life president could be doing policy-wise if they were willing to reach out to Democrats and talk about contraception and such, to reduce the number of abortions. And they don't do that. So is this because Democrats are pro-choice or Republicans are inflexible? You could look at either way. I'm reluctant to ever say you are the reason why someone is dying because you have a different policy view and political strategic view than I do. But if you are really serious about reducing the number of deaths or abortions, get a little bit more creative about how you want to go at these problems, because obviously just the inflexible approach isn't getting you what you want.
Well, but I don't want to get too heated here, because we've always, we've kept it very fun on the DMZ, and that's not a fun topic. But, this is sort of like a Swiftian, sort of thing. But kids are a pain in the ass, Bill. And I think you can make an argument that they cost a lot of money, and they got to have it's hard to afford. Like, what if I decided that my 2-month-old, really was no longer wanted or needed? Okay. Now, look, I think there'll be a couple of approaches to avoid this type of situation. We could try to instill a culture of life where people don't want to commit infanticide. We could try to make sure that people have jobs. We could make sure that there's like free babysitting, or that there's a tax rebate if you have a family. We could do all sorts of things, but I still think there should be a law against killing a 1-month-old baby. Okay, so like, on principle, as a civilization, I believe that we should go on record and say it would be wrong to kill a 1-month-old baby. But simultaneously, I would certainly be open to, like, if this were something that was happening a lot, maybe we can find ways to change the culture and to change the policies. Do you get where I'm coming from with this? Maybe it sounds crazy, but
well,
that's kind of how I feel.
Well, I mean, I understand if you are adamantly anti-abortion, you don't draw a distinction between a 1-month-old baby and a 7-month-old fetus. And look, even with most, pro-choice folks, no one says that abortions in the third trimester are something that should happen willy-nilly. These are very rare circumstances that only happen when there's health complications with the mother. But I think when you get into the infanticide argument, I think a lot of folks on the pro-choice side say that they just tune out. Like that framework is not conducive to coming up with strategies to reduce the number of abortions, because that just puts folks on opposite pages altogether.
Well, but my point here is not to persuade people to agree with me. It's to explain to people why it is that I have made this proclamation that I'm not going to vote for Trump or Biden. But I understand that other people will prioritize different things. I just think that I wanted to explain to people why I view both of those things as deal breakers.
I understand. I do think we would be remiss to have a DMZ 2 weeks before the end of the Democratic convention, week and a half before the beginning of the Democratic convention, and not talk VP. I mean, I think we have a professional obligation to talk Veep stakes.
I know. I don't want to get my union card revoked. My commentator's license pulled.
Is Bass done?
She is the candidate who said good things about Castro, right?
Well, she referred to him when he died as Comandante El Jefe, which was interpreted as being overly nice. She said that was a mistake, but she did a lot of activism in Cuba. She was building housing in Cuba when she was much younger. So it's not just the one comment. It's that she's had a long history of activity in Cuba. Plus, she did the speech of the Church of Scientology. So I think there's an argument that I would subscribe to.
I heard someone say that the Cubans will take, if an American comes down there, they'll try to take a lot of pictures with them. And so there could be pictures of her with, like, you know, Castro adjacent people that would surface as well. So I do think she's probably not going to be the running mate. How about you?
Yeah, I think Bass is not an option at this point. I think there's too much there. And I don't think she was that strong candidate in the first place. I mean, it's one thing if, like, a candidate was so awesome, so amazing, that you would say, look, I'll shoulder some of this baggage. We can talk past it. We can get over it. She's so good that it's worth it. I think Bass seems like to be a very capable legislator. I think she's a serious person. I don't think she should be defined by Cuba and Scientology. I mean, she's not a Scientologist herself. But it doesn't make sense to thrust her, to introduce someone to the public as VP when this is very top of mind. It's not going to be a good rollout.
Do no harm. The interesting thing is, I mean, Castro in Cuba arguably did in Bernie Sanders. I mean, that seemed to be a turning point.
Well, I was having an argument on Twitter again with Ryan Grimm of The Intercept. And this gets into the whole what happened in the primaries, the Cory Bush winning the primary over William Clay, which was the the third incumbent House Democrat to be ousted in a primary after Dan Lipinski and Eliot Engel. I think this is more akin to Engel than Lipinski, because these are both sort of bona fide Justice Democrat candidates. I think Justice Dems did endorse Newman, but she was endorsed by Emily's List and Planned Parenthood. She was not as hard left of a candidate. This is only slightly more incumbents going down than past cycles, and it's not even that much. I mean, then you have a few Republicans that have gone down too. I think we are up to 7 this cycle. I think it was 4 or 5 last cycle. There's a bit more of an ideological tinge to these ousters, so it's not like it is irrelevant to the question of the ideological tug of war in the Democratic Party. But I was making the point that don't overinterpret this to say like somehow the populist left has the whip hand in this argument. Biden still won the presidential primary. The vast majority of House Democratic candidates are moderate pragmatists. Just because a few things happen in some very, very deep blue districts that don't overinterpret. And Ryan Grimm was coming back about I'm missing the big picture. This is sort of the beginning of, a likely longer arc. And I was bringing up the presidential primary, and he was like, oh, well, that was just the Democrats bigfooting it. Pete, Amy, Beto, Clyburn, using their levers of power to stop Bernie. And my retort is, they can't do that without a receptive audience, without there being enough moderates in the party to want to hear what they have to say. And Bernie, and so he said, well, what if Pete, Beto, Amy, Claire endorsed Bernie? What would happen then? I was like, that would probably work very well. That would be the moderates saying, hey, Bernie, I know Bernie is not crazy town. You can trust this guy to unify the party. Bernie made a very faithful decision. I'm not saying this is the only thing. I mean, it was uphill for him regardless, but he had a moment where he could have made the pivot and say, hey, I nominally won Iowa, I won New Hampshire, I won Nevada, I got a head of steam. I can be a party unifier. Watch what I do now. What's the first thing he does after Nevada? He goes on 60 Minutes and refuses to throw Fidel Castro under the bus. And that makes Democrats go, oh man, well, there's no way. We gotta stop this guy now. Which is the most available moderator? It's still Joe Biden. He's the guy. So Castro still, if you can't shake that, now Bass is trying to shake it. Bass is trying to say, hey, I wouldn't do that again. But without having a longer relationship with Democrats outside of her own district, that's a harder pivot to make at this juncture. So I think that puts her way down on the list. That may probably narrows you to Harris, Rice, Demings, Duckworth, Warren. I think Warren has a lot of baggage as well. I think she'd be too ideologically polarizing to fit with the Biden brand, so I don't expect her. Demings has gone kind of quiet after the police brutality articles came up in Politico and the New York Times. So I think her buzz is way, way down. That leaves you with Harris, Rice, Duckworth.
I feel like Duckworth, and maybe it's just my perception, but I feel like Duckworth is gaining a little bit in my estimation as a likely nominee.
I mean, she had the one gaffe. She had the statue gaffe, which she arguably recovered from. Had a pretty fierce response to Tucker Carlson. Might make Biden pause and say, you know what, good recovery, but I still don't know if you're really up to the white hot spotlight that this is going to entail. And she hasn't had that experience the way that Harris has had and Warren has had, and Rice has had to a degree. She's been in the Klieg lights as a national security.
But she hasn't done that well.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, I think that is the downside for Rice, that she's had her missteps. The argument for Rice is, let the Republicans go down the conspiracy rabbit hole with her. That's going to look ridiculous in a time of pandemic. And it might. But if there's one thing Republicans have been good at is stoking ridiculous conspiracies about Democrats. I mean, who would have thought Pizzagate would have the traction that did against Hillary Clinton, but it did. So I think if you want to avoid doing something that's going to give Trump something in his wheelhouse, you would avoid Rice. And so I still say Harris is the likely pick. With all that in mind, the most tested, not flawless, but the most tested, and I think the least risky. I mean, the one thing I would say about Harris that I didn't incorporate when I did my initial rankings in March for Politico, and I said Harris was the least risky, and I did another piece in Real Clear Politics saying she was the do no harm candidate. Her detractors in my mind at the time were pretty limited to the hard left Kamala as a cop Bernie crowd. And I think we have seen that her detractors are broader than that. There are people who are not hard left that are saying to themselves, man, if Kamala is the VP, she's got the pole position for 2024 and the rest of us are screwed. We gotta stop this from being decided in the next 2 weeks. Anyone but Harris, so that doesn't happen. So I think that is true that she has her detractors. I still think they are not that broad, and people will get over it if she gets the pick and is sure-footed in the aftermath of that. I don't think she's had a gaffe in the Veep stakes process, and she's been out there. She's been giving interviews. I think she is showing that whatever mistakes she made in the primary campaign, that she has learned from those lessons by and large. So that's why I think she still has the inside track here. I mean, I can't know what's in the vet. I can't know if Biden has some personal animus still, even though he's saying he doesn't. If Biden doesn't trust her for whatever reason, he shouldn't pick her. But from what I can see from the outside, she still makes the most sense to me.
I think you're right. I go Kamala 1, Duckworth 2, Rice 3 right now. Mm-hmm.
And so would you agree that Demings, Warren, Bass don't seem short list at this point?
Yeah. I think certainly Warren and Bass don't. Mm-hmm. But I generally think that's right.
So should Biden get this done as soon as possible? I mean, we're now down to a 2-week window here the last he can do is like literally the last day of the convention in 2 weeks. Should he get it done the early side of that, or is there some value here? And this is I'm gonna give a leading question. Dragging this out gives a chance for the media to find something. Maybe find something you don't have. Maybe it's something you do have. But the fact that maybe they had the Bass stuff. I mean, I think the Daily Caller just used Google to find the Cuba stuff and the Scientology stuff. But if more of that can happen, and you can see how the public reacts, see how the candidate reacts, why not wait till the absolute last minute so every possible thing can get aired publicly before you make the final decision?
Once again, Bill, I think we agree. Why not wait? Maybe the political landscape will change. Maybe there'll be a major news event that would change things. Maybe it gives more time to do proper vetting. The only other reason I would cite that you didn't cite to buttress your case is I think by and large Biden benefits when this election is about Donald Trump. So we don't want it to be, Democrats don't want it to be about Biden's running mate. And so I would say the focus is presumably going to shift to Biden during the convention. It's going to be a couple days where it will be about Biden. Make the announcement then, condense that space. But right now, I mean, why take the focus? Why take the focus off of Trump when Trump is doing things like the Jonathan Swan interview? Why distract? He's in the process.
Well, I think we should leave it there because my battery's running out.
That's a good reason,
so we'll figure out if we should go next week or not. We're doing DM Zoom tomorrow.
Yeah, we should do it. I'm thinking late afternoon.
Okay, I think that should work. So if you're not already a Patreon subscriber to one of us, give us a few bucks, get access to the exclusive DM Zoom chats. And if we don't see you tomorrow, hopefully we'll see you next week.
You got it. Thanks, Bill.
Take
See
care.
you guys.